Square Ball Podcast.
Welcome to the show. Transfer deadline day, which is very, very exciting. Dan here with Michael from the Square Ball, and we've got Phil Hay from The Athletic, who will be telling us all about it. He'll be giving us exclusives, I gather, 100% exclusives in just a minute or two. Do you want to know an exclusive?
Some so exclusive it turned out they didn't happen.
Yeah.
Or they did, or maybe something in the middle.
Give me some exclusive electrical and roofing news, Michael.
I think it's exclusive. I think we've mentioned it previously.
Yeah, but there might be somebody tuning in for the first time today and say, what is this news? Tell me what it is.
I mean, if it's your first time, you'll be surprised, first of all, that West Yorkshire Electrical sponsor this, because I suppose that'll be news to you as well.
Yeah.
If you've listened to some, you might know that they do, but you might not know about the roofing.
What, are they the fully accredited electrician based out of West Yorkshire, but will cover the whole of Yorkshire and beyond?
That's the one, yeah.
Oh, crikey. Wow.
Yeah.
Those guys.
And they also do roofing now. Because
Right.
they do a lot of solar stuff, which is roof stuff.
Is that because they're renewables no, specialists in renewables? Is that
Renewables in specialists?
Yeah, all that. That was a spoonerism, wasn't it? Yeah, so they do so much solar panel work that they don't want to leave your roof in a mess, or you get some cowboy in. They'll do it. They've got their own roofers now. That's exciting. But I need to know where to find information about this, because you've thrown it all at me and I can't digest it without going onto the internet and reading about these services. Where would I find it?
wyelectrical.co.uk.
Great.
There you go.
That was done perfectly. And if you are new to the show, it's always this professional.
Good.
We should say. Well, Phil Hay, it's deadline day. What do you say?
Hurrah! Favourite day of the year, always.
It's 10 o'clock on deadline day, we should say.
It is, yeah. Let's definitely timestamp this.
10:03.
Yes, waiting to see if they do anything. And I do think, I'm aware that there's a bit of chuntering about the way this window has gone. I think it would be fair to say in this window that they haven't been trying not to sign people. Does that make sense? I was just thinking as I was driving in, there were times, certainly in the Bates era, where I took the January deadline week off because it was quite clear they weren't going to do anything. And there were definite periods in that time where you felt as if the club were sort of, I don't know if you say actively not trying to sign anybody, but there didn't seem much motivation to improve, fairly bang average squads. I think this year it isn't a bang average squad. This season it's been, Leeds have been strong team. Squad has held up well. There is a gap at right back, as we can all see. I don't think it's been a month where they haven't tried to do anything, but we're sitting at 10 o'clock on deadline day, still waiting for signing number one to come through the door.
What are we going to do with Dan James this deadline day? We normally like to mess him around in some way. Should we send him for a medical somewhere?
Yeah, Dan James. Well, as it stands, Dan James might be one of the Welshmen welcoming in Connor Roberts if Leeds do actually get Connor Roberts over the line. That's the one that seems to have developed overnight. So talking again about that this morning, been interested in him all month, but I've got to this point without actually doing a right back. And that is very much the priority position for Farke. We saw him yesterday, so we were asking him about transfers, and it was very much the same answers to many of the same questions. It has boiled down to defensive recruits now from his point of view. He wasn't making much of a secret about that, but he was still in that kind of grey area, that middle ground of saying, if there's something that we can do, then we will. If there isn't something that we want to do, then we won't, and we'll plough ahead with the squad as we've got. I do think, and we've been saying all month, I do think a right back makes total sense. I think it needs to be done with Spence and Ayling moving on. And given that there are fresh talks about Roberts as we speak, it's clear that is still very much a priority position.
As long as they've tried, Phil, that's the important thing, because I think fans all over the world who follow Leeds United will want to know, as long as they've tried.
Yeah, that's all that matters.
That's the important bit.
Well,
like
well done for making the effort.
When we were so close to signing Cody Gakpo that time.
Yes.
That's right.
Everyone went, well done.
Yeah, people appreciated the arrangement of the private jet that didn't fly anybody home.
Have we sent a private jet to Burnley?
No, I don't think so. Helicopter, probably.
Right.
Are there any landing strips round about Burnley?
Don't talk about people renting private planes in Burnley. It's flown some bad banners in the past.
That's true. That's true, is that?
I would guess it's quite hilly round there, isn't it? I would guess easier to land a helicopter on the pitch than it is to land a private jet. So a quick car journey, if that one can get moving. Another Welshman added to the crop. Like I say, that he's been on the list all month. So they liked Nico Williams, and I know I'm repeating myself here, but they liked Nico Williams at Nottingham Forest. Nuno decided that Williams was too good to let go, wanted to keep him. Forest are not in a good way, so not really in a position to be bombing out everybody and anybody. So that one was kind of off the table. Others like Ben Johnson at West Ham didn't really get going, and West Ham are still very much minded to try and get him on a new contract if they can. And what you found, and this is quite often why clubs it's a bit of brinkmanship why clubs wait until the back end of the window to let players go, is that Crystal Palace were in for Johnson earlier this week, trying to do him permanently. West Ham weren't interested in that either. Would still like to retain Johnson longer term if they can. So it has been a case of waiting for things to fall into place. And with Roberts, again, they've had an eye on him. At the moment, Burnley look like they've got a right back coming in from Rennes in France, which obviously opens the door for somebody to go.
It's pronounced Ron. As Moscow says it.
That'll do, yeah.
So it's all getting a bit hello, isn't it?
Yeah, but he looks like it's close for them. So kind of domino effect. I feel as if a right back would be enough. If they get a right back and if they do only one player in this window, I'm conscious of what's going on at centre back, but I think if Strike recovers, no problem, and in a reasonably short time frame, particularly with Creswell back in the picture, then they're okay in that area. And I think it's probably difficult to manage a squad in which you've got 5 centre backs vying for position, and given that it's been quite difficult to manage 4. When we've seen what's happened with Creswell, adding another one to the mix doesn't make that any easier, unless, of course, you've got somebody coming in who can double as a right back as well. So if they finish the window with somebody like Roberts, I'd be pretty content with that, I think.
Do you think doing the right back would be enough to mollify the wider fan base? Because people will also look at left back and say, Junior Firpo, Sam Byram, both prone to injury, both seem to be okay at the minute, but you can guarantee tomorrow night, Friday night will come around and Junior starts just, being a bit heavy-legged. Starts limping in the second half and everybody starts to panic. There've been a few issues in this window. One of them is definitely the fact that Premier League clubs more and more, when they send players out, particularly players who they rate or want to develop, want to know that those players are going to play and that they're going to get minutes. There are some clubs in the Championship in particular who, because a lot of Premier League loanees do go to the Championship, who can promise that. There are some who definitely can't. So if we go back to Fabio Carvalho at Liverpool, Hull were able to say to Liverpool, we will play him. He'll be in the team. He'll get loads of games, loads of minutes. Fine. Leeds could in no way pretend that Carvalho was going to come in and suddenly Ruta was going to drop out of the team. That just wasn't going to happen. And Liverpool are not stupid, so had Leeds said, lied and said, Carvalho will play all the time, Liverpool might have thought, don't know if we really believe that. So that's one obstacle. You'll have seen the link with the Japan right back Hashioka, Santroiden in Belgium last weekend. It was a slightly strange one, that, because it broke early on the Sunday morning, and I got in touch with somebody who I was pretty sure would know, and they said to me, "Oh no, he's going to the Premier League. No, it's basically a done deal with Luton. It still needs to be completely wrapped up, but no, he'll go to Luton." So that was almost gone before it had materialised publicly. The stories it's told me from the Leeds end was that they'd really liked him. They were very tempted to do it. They were starting to get paperwork together. He'd picked up an ankle injury in a game in Belgium, and they were concerned about the risk of recurrence. And let me finish here because I know what you're going to say. But the message basically was they needed players who they could count on to be able to play immediately, and come into the team if they needed them, that Farke could call on straight away without any fear of them being out for a while. Now, if they sign nobody, what you're going to say is, well, they haven't got anybody to play anyway, which would be a fair point. But obviously, if they do come up with another right back, then you understand the logic. But anyway, Hashioka, on the basis of injury, and I suspect Luton probably being able to pay more in wages as well, being Premier League club, he went elsewhere. Then you have the challenge of persuading certain players that they're going to play enough, never mind the clubs. And you also have other instances like Ben Godfrey, where he is out of the picture, Leeds and others are looking at him. And then suddenly him and Dyche, chat it over. He gets a game against Fulham. He's back involved at Everton. Everton don't really have the depth to be able to let people go, and that one seems to fade off the table as well. So it's pretty complicated, and that's without even touching on the fact that Leeds are not in a position in PNS, FFP terms, to be able to spend a lot of cash. Well, we keep hearing that as a theme, don't we? I mean, how true is it?
I think it is true. Yeah, no, I think it is. And you're seeing, particularly in the Premier League, that FFP is starting to be applied more forcefully now. And there is a prevailing view that that's because of the threat of the independent regulator from the government, and clubs in the Premier League as a whole would like to fend that off, or to try and fend it off, by making the government and others look at them and think, actually, they are dealing with, financial excess, and they are dealing with mismanagement of accounts and everything else. And I don't think it's a coincidence at all that Newcastle, having had this Saudi takeover, and everybody assumed that would be the beginning of really big spending at St James's Park. And they have spent money, and they have invested in a totally different way to how it was under Mike Ashley. It's not a coincidence that you get into this window and suddenly people are talking about Kieran Trippier being sold, about Newcastle needing to pull in money for FFP reasons. It is very real, and it is an obstacle. Farke has spoken about it a lot. Almost every time he's asked about transfers, and again yesterday, he's referred to the position they're in, the financial rules that exist, the inability to just spend whatever you want. And I've spoken to several people who've said in the Championship, among clubs who don't have parachute payments and who've been there for a while, they are very, very strong on P&S because they think it's about the only thing that lets them compete with Leeds, Leicester, Southampton when they come down. And you have to say that even with P&S, Ipswich aside, nobody is really competing with them.
No, and you get a feeling it's going to get more stratified like that, don't you?
Very much so.
Going forward, because it feels like don't know if you agree, the Championship is kind of becoming a little bit more financially homogenised. The people are not pushing the boat out as much. They are being more sensible finally. And I know that it feels like there's been a bit of a lag in it. Everybody's getting their ducks in a row really where that's concerned and not taking the risks that we've seen in the past.
It's not been a highly dramatic month, has it, in the Championship at all? There are a couple of... I would say that I don't think there are a vast number of signings out there that I've looked at and thought would have been great if Leeds had done that. David Brooks to Southampton I really like as a signing. I think it's a really good signing for Southampton. Carvalho to Hull is a good one as well. Hull have probably gone for it as much as anybody else in this window. I think they're definitely getting a sniff of the playoffs at Hull and thinking that might be there for them. Certainly as opportunity to get in them and then see what happens. But there hasn't been massive expenditure. And I was reading this morning about Broja down at Chelsea, the fact that the loan fee for him will be about £5 million, which is, I wouldn't expect him to go to the Championship. I would think he would be a Premier League loanee. But even so, if like Carvalho, he's desperate for a game or he needs to find somewhere to go, that is beyond, certainly in January, that's beyond the stretch of most Championship clubs to pay. It's a lot of money. And so you were asking whether or not, the picture we're seeing in the Championship at the moment with relegated teams then looking so strong is going to continue and perhaps get even more vivid. I think it probably will.
Farke did touch on the financial fair play position, as you said in his most recent press conference, Phil, and the reference there was to the amount of loanees that we've got. I suppose the implication there, was it that we would have probably sold one or two of those players to give ourselves more headroom? Is that about the thrust of it?
Absolutely, because that's what happened at Southampton and that's what happened at Leicester. Leicester were able to sell Harvey Barnes, James Maddison, big money, which also made them a very, very big profit, which is crucial for the way in which you balance your accounts for FFP. And more to the point, depending on how you choose to bank it and choose to book it, can help you with the immediate season ahead. Southampton likewise were able to sell a lot of players and to pull money in. Leeds didn't do a huge amount because they couldn't. Partly because players were entitled to go on loan when Leeds got relegated. Partly because there weren't that many players who they wanted to sell and get rid of who they would have made a profit on. So they would have been booking a loss, and that would have made the FFP position more difficult again and would have restricted how much they were able to do in the transfer market. So yes, if they'd been able to pull in 20 million quid in profit for Aronson, 10 million quid in profit for Robin Koch, on and on and on, all these players, rather than merely pulling in £20 million for Tyler Adams, which can't have, slightly in excess, but can't have made a significant profit on that at all, then it might have been different. But that hasn't helped them. It has cut the wage bill. It did significantly cut the wage bill. I think the wage bill was virtually halved, or the monthly payments from what I was told at the start of the season. That was a big decrease. But when it came to hard cash coming in transfer fees, there wasn't enough. There wasn't much.
And we had a lot of outgoings in the summer. And it feels like we're making excuses for the lack of activity, but I think it's probably important to spell out the position is that I think as it was relayed or as it was understood, we paid out about 50 million quid in transfer fees for previous signings in the summer, didn't we?
It's the staggered payments that pretty much apply to every deal. So if you take Hashioka, for example, the fee that was reported at Luton was about €2 million. So if you're spreading that across, a kind of payment plan, if you want to call it that, but that's effectively what it is, across a number of years, it's not actually a massive outlay for each payment. It's the sort of cash that even in the Championship you can manage at this time of year. In terms of the lack of activity, how much were we expecting anyway? Really, at the start of the window, if they were to go out this window without anything and not to do anything at right back, then I would understand the anxiety and the paranoia about that. The kind of suspicion that might catch up on them at some point and they might be left to rue it. But I'm really not sure how much else I expected them to do.
I think the incomings are balanced by the outgoings though as well, because it's not long ago that we thought we had Spence and Ayling as a right back cover. So maybe
and Cody Dramé.
That was a very long time ago. But yeah, there was a point where you thought, well, we're actually fairly well covered there. Maybe in the window we're looking for a number 10, but then we've since discovered Root as a 10 and sold all the right backs. So the picture has changed.
Spence, I will give you absolutely. And yes, they have lost a right back in Ayling, but I really don't remember people crowing much for Ayling to be playing before Christmas. And he was a long way from certainly from the starting lineup in Farke's view, which is not to say that they can. They should be running with the number of right backs they have at the moment. They do need more there. I think one would be enough. I think they're conscious as well that they do want to give Archie Gray game time, and that isn't his position, but it is still minutes on the pitch for him, and it does still help with his development. Had there been no resolution with Creswell, or had Creswell gone, or if the strike injury was more serious than it seems to be? When we spoke to Farke yesterday, he said he thought it would be 2 weeks probably before Strike was back in full training, but that this injection therapy, as he put it, seems to have gone pretty well. And he's back doing individual training. That doesn't sound like it's going to be a massive problem. So again, I wouldn't have been looking, in these circumstances, I wouldn't have been expecting much at centre-back. Left-back, you're right, if there's an injury to Firpo or Byram, it becomes a problem. But I think you're in the same territory there, aren't you? That anybody coming in, you're saying to them, look, if those two are fit, then you're probably not playing. And it's not much of a sell, and it does tend to be quite difficult when you're going well. It's not always easy. But I think there are right backs out there that they could take. Roberts being one of them. A lot of people this morning seem to think that has got legs now. So we will see. But it would just make sense. It would just be sensible.
Do we now have a bit of a problem with depth in terms of once you get beyond the first team squad? Because we've seen the under-21s take a couple of pastings. Well, I know it ended up 3-1 at Sunderland, but at one point it looked like it was going to happen again. But it's 10 goals conceded, and there's not a lot in there at the moment that you look at and you see as potential for moving into the first team.
No, I agree with that. The 21s have not drawn a lot of attention this season, and I think part of the reason for that is that Archie Gray has moved up now comprehensively. He is just a first team player. I don't expect to see him play for the 21s again unless he's coming back from injury and needing some games. And there isn't a lot in the 21s that, as you said, you're looking at and thinking they look like they might be ready to push through. So when it comes to right back, okay, Gray is playing there, but he's a centre mid. There isn't like a young right back that you would say, yeah, okay, you step in. It's strange, Dramé was a long time ago now when he went to Birmingham, but he'd done well with Luton in the Championship, and he'd done well when he'd been out previously at Cardiff. It just didn't seem to be the right fit for Farke. And you have to say with Farke, when he's made decisions with players, he's made decisions. Helder's gone. He's gone to Sunderland again. Has not been in the picture at all right the way through the season. And I think we've touched on this previously, but the crop of academy players that they paid for, the older academy players, kind of late teens who they paid for, your Gelharts and so on, some of them have worked out. Strike, Somerville, quite a lot of them haven't. And, JB going to Plymouth, Helder now moving on to Sunderland. There are quite a few that they did invest a bit in that haven't paid off. And it hasn't, at the moment, in first team terms, it hasn't left a huge amount under the surface.
Sonny Perkins, the one name in the under-21s that does stand out because you go, oh yeah, him. He was going to be good at one point.
But he can't go anywhere else, can he? Because he's played for 2 clubs this season.
No, that's right. And again, a player who took quite a lot of effort to sign. And you already think like the future for him at Leeds doesn't look wide and glorious, particularly. It's not to say that it can't change, but he's not somebody who Farke is going to rely on at any stage this season. He's not going to play for the first team. That goes without saying, I think. So I think in this window it had to be players coming in from the outside. As I say, the picture as it is now, if they got a good right back in, I think that would be. I think they'd have done the minimum that they had to do, if you know what I mean. And I think in most other positions, I do get the argument that you might well have been signing people who you weren't really going to use.
Is there, I don't know, is there a thought process perhaps going on behind the scenes where they are preferring loans because they've got one eye on potential promotion, or not being lumbered with players, and I say lumbered with in a very sort of loose sense, lumbered with players who maybe aren't good enough to make the step up if they do get up? Are they guilty of looking too far down the road? Do we have to get there first? Or
I don't think it's so much that as not having the money to do big transfer fees or the financial fair play wriggle room to do big transfer fees. I think financially there's a limit to how far they can push themselves. So whereas with Hashioka, as I was saying, €2 million and in structured payments is not a vast amount of cash. That you can manage. But if you're getting into the realms of an Ampadu or a Pirro or anything like that, that is far more chunky, far more substantial. If you then start looking to players who are actually proven at Premier League level, then you're talking far more money again. I mean, transfer fees in the Premier League now just seem to start at around about 15 to 20 million quid, for anybody who would be able to float at that level. You'll have seen the midfielder from Blackburn, Wharton, going to Crystal Palace, £22 million for that. The numbers are just going up and up and up. So I think in this window, okay, Hashioka is over in Belgium, but most of the players they've been linked to, most of the players that they've thought about, seem to be loanees that can come from the Premier League, which means that there's obviously a wage recovery that the parent club will look for, and you have to pay. You got to pick up part or all of their salary. But not all of these players will involve loan fees. Sometimes the loan fees will be fairly modest, so again, pretty manageable. It's kind of affordable. And again, if you look through the Championship, there hasn't been a huge amount spent on actual permanent transfer fees. There have been a lot of loans, which is not too much of a surprise. I meant to mention, actually, did you see that Vyman's gone from Bristol City?
No way.
Yeah. Can you believe it? However, he's not bailed out of the Championship because he's gone to West Brom.
Really?
Yes.
Not a strange move, but yeah, it feels... Is it a sideways move? I don't know.
Maybe sideways and up, slightly.
Marginally up. Yeah, it's not a huge leap upwards, is it? When you do expect when players leave the Championship, because it is becoming some homogenised, that they almost will. But I guess... I
can't remember whether Vyman fell into your grizzled category or whether he fell into the has been at Bristol City for a million years.
What? I don't know if he perhaps struck me as fancy grizzled, if you like. Slightly fancy grizzled. Championship.
Early promise becoming grizzled.
Yeah,
I think he's very.
Eventually default into.
At some point, he thought he could move on and do better things. Nope.
Yeah.
Now firmly grizzled.
West Brom 5th and Bristol City are, where are they in the table?
Very much mid-table.
13th. So
yes.
8 places he's gone up the ladder there.
Yeah.
Oh,
quite
wow.
a good move, really.
Yeah, just actually with regards to wages and the lack of FFP headroom, Yelder's gone out, Jenkins, Ayling, Spence. Who else have we lost this month? Anybody else, or is that the lot?
I believe that's everybody.
Yeah.
Of note, yeah.
It's quite a significant chunk of wages, isn't it?
Spence and Ayling in particular. Jenkins and Helder. I mean, Helder wouldn't have been on tiny money, but Helder and Jenkins are not going to clear the way for you to sign somebody expensive from the Premier League. Spence, different. Ayling will have been on a good wage as well, having been at Leeds for a while and gone through contracts. So it does definitely free some up, which is why if they were to do Connor Roberts today, for example, you're able to do that because there is some flexibility and there is some room on the wage bill.
I mean, even 20 grand a week, which you got is probably a fairly average Championship salary. If Yelder got when did he get his contract renewal? Did he get one? And was it in the Premier League? Because even if he's on 20 grand a week, it's still £1 million.
He only signed, it was 2 or 3 years ago now. But coming down from Celtic and Leeds were a Premier League club at the time, it'll have been a decent amount. How much it is, I don't know. Is the honest answer. But you have to remember that wages in the Premier League are going up and up and up too, and are getting really steep. And if a club in the Premier League who's loaning somebody out is willing to do a kind of wage deal, whereby you pay a portion of it, then fine. But if they want the whole salary covered, which in quite a lot of instances they do, then you need to find a lot of money for that.
It's like Spence is the one you would imagine would be quite expensive.
So, yeah.
Again, if it's 40 grand a week, you're then talking 2 million quid. If it's 50 grand, so on, you're talking 2.5 million. So they're not amounts to be sniffed at when you actually start to tally them up, are they? If it gives the capacity to bring in 1 or 2 for the rest of the season.
The figures in football are hideous, yeah. No, it's massive amounts of money sloshing about all over the place.
And that's just at the Athletic.
Yeah.
Zing. With reference to Bristol, we go there tomorrow.
Yes.
What time are you setting off?
Well, I've got a hotel, so I'll...
Bloody Athletic
money.
I know,
just
riding the gravy train. Better than the BBC, isn't it?
Are you flying down as well?
Helicopter,
I was going to say, you referenced the helicopter. It's because it was in your mind.
Yeah, once Connor Roberts is finished with it, I'll jump in and wing down to the Avon. I don't know, go about midday, get checked in.
Look at that. What a life.
Yeah.
Are you driving?
I'll drive, yeah.
Yeah, you drive. Well, that's good of you.
Chauffeur's busy.
What time's he picking? Yeah. What time's he going to pick you up? Is what I was going to say, but you beat me to the punch. Yeah. Do we need to win this game? I'm just looking at the other fixtures.
Yes.
All right, fair enough. No, just looking at the other fixtures. Ipswich face Preston, which I think it could be quite difficult for them if Preston. Our recent experience with them is anything to go by, but I'm sure Preston will just do that thing of rolling over and having their tummies tickled.
They're due a look change with the referees though as well.
Yeah,
haven't been so hard done to.
And hopefully the conditions are more optimal. And there's no wind that causes them to concede penalties. Did you see those comments this week?
I did.
Ryan Lowe, yeah. Do you think the wind caused that penalty?
No.
No.
Do you think it hit in his hand caused the penalty?
I think it might have done. I think there's a chance.
Southampton have got Rotherham away, which you would expect them to win, all things being equal. But you never know in this league, do you? Sometimes funny things can happen. But
it would be quite a notable thing, I think, for Leeds, even for a short while, to move into second place, because then you really start to feel like it's on. And even though they've closed the gap, there are games in hand elsewhere. I still don't think there's going to be. I don't think there's going to be much breathing space when it comes to the number of games Leeds can lose or the number of points they can drop before the end of the season. I think I'm put themselves in this position. Yeah, they do need to win at Ashton Gate, partly because it's against. I don't think Bristol City are a bad team at all, but it's against the mid-table side. So you fancy yourself on that basis, and you do need to keep putting the pressure on. Don't forget that Southampton are on this run of games where being unbeaten for such a long time.
Yeah, they need to grow up.
Grow up and just let it all fall apart. Yeah. But they feel like the threat for second place, don't they? As I say, I think Brooks is a really good sign for them. I think he'll make a difference. Leicester, I will just direct people, and I did mention this to you yesterday, but to the report that our Leicester writer Rob Tanner did from their game against Swansea in midweek.
Is this about the crowds on? Yeah, I mentioned it on one of the show. I mentioned it on the show this week.
They absolutely swatted Swansea aside. Comfortable win. They're 1 point off 70. They're on for 109 points at the moment. And the piece is basically talking about the grumbling in the crowd about the way they play and also the lack of transfers and everything else.
We like you winning, but not like that.
But it seemed to be the gist of it. I mean, there was a comment underneath which I was having a laugh at, which seemed to say, we might win a lot of games, but we don't win them by scoring enough goals or something like that. And, there will obviously, with Maresca, there will come a pressure point where his football gets seriously tested if they go up. And I did think, looking at them against Leeds, that the way they were playing and trying to play out from the back, press them hard enough and press them with better players and with more elite squads and they would improve over the summer, but you could see that developing into a problem. But there does seem to be quite a lot of grumbling about lateral passing, going backwards, this, that, and the other, despite the fact that they're almost qualified for the playoffs, you would think, and are basically going up top two. Strange.
No one's happy in football, are they? As Rob said when we discussed this on the show this week.
No
one's happy.
Entertainment's kind of intangible, isn't it? Like what people want to see really good football, but then you have to be winning. Otherwise, really good football gets very annoying very quickly if you're not winning. And you can have both.
It's bad. Like
it's quite hard to find that sweet spot.
Griping at Farker for our style of football, and it has been quite boring at times. But I've also conditioned myself to understand that this is how you win games by controlling them.
Boring periods during matches, aren't there? Or if boring's the right word, there are flat periods where it's not hell for leather and it's not going for the jugular, but it's been very effective, and there have equally been periods in the games where it's been extremely engaging. But
that's all. It's all influenced by what's happening above us, isn't it? And I know, like with Ipswich and Southampton, we're starting to really squeeze that down. Which we've got to say absolute credit to Leeds for having reeled them in off the back of what was a fairly mediocre start.
I was trying hard to write this in the Norwich piece to say that you've got Southampton who, unbeaten in 20. So their best run of form in the league for 100 years or more, 120 years, something like that. 100 years, I think. You've got Ipswich who are in the position they're in, points tally they're in. You've got Leicester who are, as I say, on for well over 100 points at the moment. And Leeds have kept in touch. And I think it's quite easy to underestimate how difficult that's been or how good Leeds have had to be. And it did interest me that on both expected goals front, certainly last time I looked, and I haven't looked since the Miller game. Yeah, I'm just setting you up for the home and away table, which we haven't had yet.
I've got it open on my laptop. There you go.
Who'd have thought? Who'd have thought? But on both fronts, when I looked, and I think it was after the Norwich game, Leeds had the best stats on up front and at the back. Certainly from expected goals. I know expected goals and not actual goals. But they have been a really good team. And it does make me think that, sadly, for the Championship, it's boiled down to the stage where the only point of the Championship is to get out of it. And that is how a lot of people look at it. And once you start to get the feeling that you might get out of it, automatically you start to look ahead and to think, and I'm guilty of this as well, how is this going to work in the Premier League? What are you going to have to do if you go up? And let's not pretend that the summers aren't quick and sharp and you've got a lot to do in a short period of time. But it was one of the beauties of the season when Leeds were promoted, wasn't it? Was that you felt like you were able to enjoy it and immerse yourself in it. But Farke made
looking back on it.
Yeah, well, yeah, no, probably true. But I don't know. There were periods where it was just magical to be in the thick of it. But Farke made a good point yesterday where he said, in comparison to that season, we're better off in terms of points after a certain number of games. And how do you argue with that? The one argument I think you can make is that this is probably a stronger starting lineup. I don't even think probably, actually. Stronger starting lineup in comparison to most of what's in the Championship than Bielsa's was. I don't think that's in dispute, and probably more valuable in terms of like underlying player valuations and everything else. But the fact remains that they are ahead of where they were in that season, which was a fantastic season.
It's got a strange shape to it at the end of this season, 'cause 17 games left, and you've said, do we need to win this? And the answer is kind of yes for all 17, isn't it? Because of the shape of the table.
Yeah, I think it is.
Because
Yeah.
everyone keeps winning. Yeah. It's weird that so normally with this many games left, you'd go, oh, well, you take a point there, take a point there, take a point there. But having played Leicester, Southampton, Ipswich away, you look at the remaining 17 and go, yeah, we'll just win them all.
Yeah, my optimism is rooted in us going on a run like that, I think. Whether that's realistic or unrealistic, I don't know.
17-game winning streak.
Not necessarily a winning streak.
In fact, more, because we're already on one.
But maybe we drop a couple of points here and there. Like, I look at this Bristol game and I think, a point might not be abysmal, but in the overall, like you said, the overall shape of the table suggests that you need to win it. But I don't know why. But it's probably just me indulging in self-talk to try and convince myself that everything's going to be all right. But I've convinced myself that Farke's approach to this season has being geared around the running, because I don't know if it's because he keeps mentioning it in terms of I'll look at the table with 6-7 games to go, that kind of thing, is that he's kind of playing the long game, and I think that's where we'll come good.
When did we last talk about 7th place? The gap to 7th place and whether that's comfortable or whatever else. It must be weeks and weeks ago, if not months, because it has been comfortable for a long time. So nobody...
We are 14 points clear of that, by the way.
Yeah, so on that basis, nobody is sitting saying...
Playoffs nailed on?
Yeah. And nobody's saying, oh, right, okay, so, with getting close to securing the playoffs, that's really good. People do think that the playoffs are inevitable because it would need a fairly extraordinary collapse from this point. So when you're saying a point in Bristol might be all right, it's not really, is it? Because what everybody's looking at is second place. And I think this becomes a game that you have to win. I think there will be fixtures that come round. So, for example, Leicester, when they come to Elland Road, where you think to yourself, if you take a point from that, you would settle for it because it's quite easily a game you could lose. Southampton at home is totally different because it just happens to be the last game of the season. So, what's needed from that depends entirely
what's that going to be like?
Yeah, one big hit. Well, it could be the game to end all games, or it could be that everything is wrapped up and decided by that point anyway, and it's a bit of a waste of time and a dead rubber. But Michael, I think, is absolutely right that there are not going to be many, if any, fixtures now before the end of the season where people are going to go to them saying, I'd take a point from this, unless Leeds get themselves into a position where they hold second place and they have a bit of a cushion and you can afford to drop points. For as long as you're chasing, you don't dare drop anything.
Just looking at the table, we've got Coventry to go to, who are currently in 6th position. And then you've got to go down.
What's their home form like?
Don't know, mate. Wouldn't know how to check.
If you were to put all their home games into like a table,
if someone was to invent a website where you could,
I would say they've probably played about 15 at home. Only lost one, which is quite interesting, but they do draw a lot at home. I think they've got about 26 points from those 15 games. But I mean, I'd have to check.
That's not a bad return though.
Yeah. This period coming up though is really important because through February they will ditch quite a few long and hard away trips, and if they can, games they should win, games they should take points from, but games which I think are made more difficult by the schedule and by some of the kickoff times and everything else. We wrote earlier this week about it. Leeds are going to fly to, I think, all of these games to limit the travel time, and I think particularly, and if you speak to fitness and conditioning people, they always talk about this to make sure that the sleep patterns are pretty regular on the way home. So rather than a 6-hour bus drive back from Plymouth, you can get home, or at least you can fly back in, I don't know, an hour, so you're in bed at a kind of sensible time. And someone I was speaking to, a guy called Callum Walsh, he said, players need that adrenaline dump after full time anyway, so even for a home game, most of them won't end up in bed until 12, 1 o'clock when it's all kind of died down. So that will make it easier in theory, but I think if they come through these games in really good shape, then they'll be in a great position for the running. I
used to get that adrenaline dump when I'd done the radio back in the day when I had that job before I got fired.
Whereas today you're going straight home to bed at 11 a.m.
It's true, it was weird. Like, I couldn't, having done like 3 hours of that, when I finished, I was completely hyped, especially if I'd had coffee like during the show, because you're so switched on and so focused. And obviously it's a different level completely again, because they're feeding off the energy of thousands of people in the stadium, aren't they?
It's like that when you've been at a game, isn't it, for a night game? Particularly if it's been an exciting one where you're kind of still knocking around the house at 1 a.m. kind of going.
Well, it's the same for us because we all work to deadlines, and you typing away trying to get your stuff done, so under pressure with that, and then when you finish, it does take an hour or so at least to
what I'm saying
wind
is
down.
It's a difficult life they've got.
He did say, Callum that I spoke to did say, I don't want to come across all woe is me, but what I am saying to you is that if you have a regular sleep pattern, it's much better for your mental state and your focus and fatigue and everything else, which is the reason why they do it. I don't think there's any evidence that flying necessarily limits injury risk or anything like that, or no conclusive proof, but it certainly helps on that front.
Yeah, the father of twins sat in the room will verify that sleep patterns are very important.
I got a method in the early days.
Yeah.
They did sleep pretty well from about 6 months, but that first 6 months.
Challenging.
Very challenging.
A never again moment, yeah.
No, absolutely not. Right, well, we'll wrap it up there then. Final thing is predictions.
What I've been doing since, eh?
Behave. Predictions. Never mind predicting what will happen at Bristol. Win, lose or draw, one of the three. Transfers. Roberts, do you think?
Well, at this point, I have to put, if there's one coming in, I would have to put money on Roberts, given what's going on this morning. Yes.
So we look forward to this being
But I'll just say it's
date.
now, having been 3 minutes past 10, it's now 10:44.
Yep.
So there's 12 hours fully to go.
Goodness, that's exciting, isn't it? Well, I look forward to us having to hastily hop back on. Was it last year that we did that? Where we're like,
every year.
Christ's sake, they've done some stuff.
Was it the non-tour year? The Gakpo?
Yes, it could have been.
Was it that window? Yeah, it might well have been.
Full Bamba Dieng.
Yeah.
Anyway,
a lot of fun that was.
Let's hope we don't do that again. But we'll catch up on the other side of it. We'll get together on Monday, if not before, to discuss what happened at Bristol, and we'll speak to you then.
The Square Ball Podcast.